Okay, there he is again. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rick Sterling from Western IM, and also from Western IM, as many of you know, because you've been on lots of our IM Canada Connect sessions over the course of time. Troy Sawyer, who does all the heavy lifting on our side of the house to make sure all this happens properly for us. Thanks, Troy. Yeah.
Good to see
Um,
everyone.
we've started off another successful IM Canada Connect year with first session was one of the Edmonton chapter sessions. And this one again, because I'm also on the board of the Edmonton chapter, along with Nicholas Fonseca, who is speaking with me today, another Edmonton chapter contribution to the IM Canada Connect series. I think it's an important topic. Nicholas and I have actually done this session a couple of times before, once at the ARMA Canada conference this year and once at the international conference this year. Both were well received by the crowd. We thought it would be good to do this session again for all of you that didn't get a chance to be at the conferences and hear us do that session live on the IM Canada Connect circuit. It's really a session that talks about the integration or the interrelationship between information governance and something you may not have ever thought of before, which is the cyber insurance that your organization has to put in place these days to cover things if there is some kind of breach. And I, of course, have been in the industry for quite a long time on the records and information management and IT side. And as has Nicholas as well, and many of you know Nicholas from all the years he's been in the ARMA world as well. But what you don't know is Nicholas also holds a lot of credentials from the insurance side of the house. So I'm going to let Nicholas talk a little bit about that as he starts off the presentation, and then I'll get in later on. So, and now RIM lining up with IT, risk, and security, a new world of IG.
Good.
Nicholas?
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Troy. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session this morning. I know that Troy will be sharing a slide deck shortly, where what I'm going to propose to you is that you have a lot of the skills that can help with making sure that your information in your organization is protected and seeing how these pieces fit together. So, Troy, if you could flip the deck on for me and run it for me, that would really, really help. So as Rick was mentioning, we presented this presentation at the ARMA Information Conference in Toronto in July, and after Toronto, we presented it at the ARMA International InfoCon in Detroit. And we had a good turnout at the session and a lot of great questions after. So we will have hopefully some time for questions. And so if we can move to the next slide, Troy, that would be great. So welcome. I've met some of you who are here. Great to see some of you that I haven't met. And of course, those of you who I know, thanks for joining. I started working in records in an insurance organization. I was given a project and asked to look after it. And I have an interest in IT too, and been playing with technology for a long time. So when it came along to the components and the domains of IG, they line up really well with cyber risk and cyber insurance as well. So we're going to talk about how those are connected and how you can help your organization. And it's not just your IT department, but also your administration when it comes to cyber insurance with some of the information that you have. So next slide, please, Troy. Thank you. So I'm glad this graphic is here because it really speaks to, we do the work that we do in records and information management to support business units within our organization and, protect the information from the past, the present, and prepare for the future as well in the information that we protect. So we also work with technology. There are some legal requirements we need to follow, as well as dealing with risk and compliance, as well as privacy. Many of you may be also the privacy officer or assisting with privacy, or the FOIP coordinator if you're in Alberta, as defined under the FOIP Act in Alberta. And if you're from other provinces, your legislation will also define that. And also there's security of information. So when you think about the things that you do, when you look at this particular graphic from ARMA, that you'll see that there's this interconnectivity where you're working to make sure that in your records retention, you're aligning with any regulatory compliance that you have to. You're hopefully able to enforce information policy, define policies and practice, or help with that. Maybe you're working with some analytics, perhaps. Maybe you are working to prevent hacking and information loss and breaches, in locking down the information and working with your IT department and providing overall easy access to information when it's needed, for whom it's needed, and in the form that they need it. So these principles of IM and IG, which also relates to the IGP, the Information Governance Professional designation as well, all link together, and I'll connect to that big wheel of standards and principles. Next slide, please, Troy. So cyber risk, and what is it? So it's any risk of financial loss, disruption of business, or damage to an organization's systems, but also reputation. So if we think of some of the recent cyber losses that we've heard about, and there are lots of cyber events taking place that we don't hear about, this definition from the Insurance Institute of Canada, I serve on the board of governors for the Institute, nationally as well as regionally. This is the definition that we use in our training material, and it can also be an unintentional or accidental security breach, such as losing a memory stick or using your laptop, going out to after work event and taking your laptop with you, going to the washroom and coming back and it's gone. So there's an unintentional, but it could lead to a breach. Then there's deliberate, where someone looks at information they shouldn't look at because they happen to have access, but they don't have a purpose to look at it. And then they may have a nefarious agenda where they destroy, spy, use the information they've seen in extortion, so for blackmail. And we've seen that happen internally in organizations, or to embarrass an organization. And then, of course, there's ransomware. So that's where it was really important to secure information and lock down information. And I think that information management and records management plays a role in that. Then, of course, there are operational IT risks. Our IT departments need to make sure that the right firewalls are in place, the endpoint protection is there, need to keep their software security up to date, and make sure that they're running those updates and patches as necessary. Where there's lack of proper security, you can have something happen. So that you really need to take care of making sure that your system is correct, is up to date. Next slide, please. So in the Criminal Code of Canada, there's been an amendment which says that using a computer without authorization is a criminal offense. Making mischief in relation to data is also a criminal offense. And again, there's that obtaining telecommunication facility without authorization, or stealing service. So the criminal code has been updated to address this. So criminal offense can cause loss or damage to a victim's computer, network, data, denies access to data or service, and enables further related crimes such as extortion or resale of the data. Next slide, please, Troy. Troy, as an aside, can you send David that invite again? And just if you could put in the
Sure. Yep.
The subject line for me. So cyber event expenses can come in a number of ways. Privacy breach resulting in person identity theft, internet media liability, talk a little bit about that, network security liability, and technology errors and omissions liability. So privacy breach, personal information is breached, third party has it, uses it for malicious purposes. Internet media liability, using somebody else's technology asset, even putting a picture on your website can open you up to internet media liability if you don't have permission to use that photograph or picture. Network security liability, being liable because your network has been breached and information has been leaked out. And then there's also technology errors and omissions liability, where a third-party provider that's providing technology services to you can result in a breach, and then they could be subject to technology errors and omissions liability. Just some examples here. On the first party side, you could have event expenses that are extortion or ransom or blackmail, the cost of restoring your system, regulatory expenses that can come from a regulator, maybe depending on the type of organization yours is, you might be fined or have to go to regulatory proceedings, which costs money if you have to hire a lawyer to do that. And interruption of your business operations. You can't operate because of the cyber event that you've been hit with. So these examples that are on this slide are actually things you can get insurance for. And so cyber insurers want to know what coverage you want, what you need, but they also want to know what technology you have and what practices you're following. Do you have a records management policy? Do you know how many records you have? Do you know where they are? Do you know which databases they sit in? What are they comprised of? Do you have a classification policy? And do you have a disposition policy and processes for these? Next slide, please, Troy. So some cyber incidents you may have heard of, the Colonial Pipeline, which affected oil and gas, the flow of oil and gas along the east coast of the United States. Marriott, the hotel chain, was breached. And also the Running Room. I shopped at the Running Room earlier this year and heard that they had been hacked during the period I had shopped. And a few months later, my credit card was charged $3,500 for a stay at the Royal York in Toronto, which I did not enjoy personally. So these things happen. Equifax, that collects our spending habits and our credit information, was hacked. The hack affected 19,000 Canadians whose data was sent cross-border to Equifax Inc. in the US. And Equifax Canada hadn't shared, nor had Equifax Inc. shared with Canadian consumers that their data would be sent over to the US, and Equifax had a breach. So you can imagine the extent of that. The City of Atlanta demonstrates the effect of not having a good risk management and cyber program that includes insurance, but also disaster recovery and also business continuity planning as well. Their systems were down for a while, and even today they haven't been able to recover data that was lost. But this is a big city providing services to its residents. Think of many other things like transportation and rec centers and street cleaning, traffic light systems. And then there's Maersk, the shipping company, that had a cyber breach and was only able to recover because one of their sites, which happened to be in Ghana, West Africa, didn't get the malware transmitted to it because the site in Ghana had a power outage and didn't run their update. But in the end, the shipping company, this logistics company, was not able to operate as it normally would, and it had to replace over 49,000 laptops because they were all affected. So only the applications, data, and hardware in Ghana that were not affected, and they were able to pick up and recover. So Ghana, which was not one of their main locations, main sites, ended up being their saving grace. And then, of course, there's been Indigo, Empire, Sobeys, and more. Government of Nova Scotia, Suncor, so Petro-Canada stations, maybe Suncor, Sunoco stations as well. You can go to conbriefing.com if you want to see more of this list, but we won't spend a lot more time on it. Next slide, please, Troy. So some of the things you need to think about in terms of cyber risk management is risk management that includes cyber. So it's looking at the risks that your organization faces, the potential for losses in a specific investment, and decide what's the appropriate action to take to deal with that risk. And then enterprise risk management, managing all of your organization's key business opportunities to protect them from the risks that you face. And they can be many, but remembering to include information, remembering to include cyber risk protection in that plan as well. For a lot of companies, they forget the information piece. They forget the cyber in terms of losing data and what it means to not be able to operate. They might just think, yeah, we've got this great technology. We love it. It's working. We're using it. But what's your backup? What's your plan? Sometimes it's seen as an IT responsibility. In many cases, it is because of the technology component. But you also have to remember that it's about the information and the data. Sure, the technology may be back up and running, but what's happened to the data? Has it been stolen, encrypted? Has it been copied? Has it been changed? Has it been leaked? So those are things that need to be thought of as well. Next slide, please, Troy. So risk management can include risk transfer, but insurance is one way of dealing with risk transfer. You could say, we're not going to go take on this line of business. We're not going to take on this particular opportunity as it relates to our business or technology, but we'll get left behind if we don't. So although avoiding is an option, it's not always the best route to go. Avoidance could mean missed economic opportunities, missed business opportunities. So insurers want their policyholders to exercise good cyber risk. Part of that is through managing your information properly, not just transferring the risk to a third party. They also want you to test your plans. Do you have a disaster recovery plan? Have you tested it? How many of you have in your organization tested a disaster recovery plan? Do you use your emergency operations center in your organization, if you have one, may have tested the plan in terms of a train derailment or in terms of a massive fire affecting several facilities that are connected on the same block. But have you tested your cybersecurity plan? Next slide, please, Troy. So there's a challenge with cyber. And one of the challenges with cyber for an insurance company is that they don't have a lot of data on cyber. Cyber risk has been evolving rapidly. It's been becoming more prevalent. We hear about something every day, at least I do. And cyber attacks can be targeted on certain verticals. They can come from anywhere in the world. Insurance companies have relied on data for their actuaries to work with to figure out how much it costs to issue an insurance policy to cover a specific risk. And a lot of that was based on geographical boundaries. So if you lived in rural Alberta somewhere, your insurance for your car or your house might be X amount of dollars. If it's in a larger city, in Vancouver or Toronto, there are other things to consider. So the price is higher, and they use the geographical rating piece to come up with what your insurance rate would be. And they also have a lot of history going back 100 years on what it has cost in terms of insured losses that the insurance company has had to pay and the insurance industry as a whole over that 100-year period. They don't have that for cyber. So they're at a disadvantage in coming up with the pricing. And you can't base a cyber insurance premium based on location. Over the years, insurance policies for your home and auto insurance have become standardized. That is not the case in cyber. It's something, again, as I said earlier, that's still evolving. Cyber attackers have their own software as a service available, malware as a service as well. attacks can come from anywhere in the world. And by 2025, it's estimated by Cyber Ventures that cybercrime will cost $10.5 trillion annually. Another challenge right now is a lot of cyber risk. A lot of organizations do not have cyber insurance. I was speaking at a national conference recently to someone for the Institute, and they were in the mergers and acquisition business, acquiring other insurance operations. And some brokers' offices that they were acquiring that sell a lot of cyber insurance didn't actually have their own cyber insurance for their business. So that was an interesting bit of information I gleaned, and I heard it again yesterday in a similar but different context. Next slide, please, Troy. So cyber insurers want to know there's a disaster recovery plan. So where is the data going to come from? Where's the backup data? Is it paper? Is it a backup that you have of your EDRMS system? Are your network drives backed up? Are you using SharePoint? What's the backup there? What happens if you have a cyber incident? Do you have a way to operate to continue your business? If you think about something that we've all experienced in the last few years, and that was a catastrophic event called COVID-19. So if you look at the lost revenue, the lost opportunity, we can look at it from the mental health aspect, mental health and wellness. We can look at it from loss of income. We have lived through that, and it hurt a lot of people more than others, illness, loss of life, and so on. Did we have the opportunity to test it? Well, I think if it ever happens again in our lifetime, we have tested and we have hopefully learned what we need to do. So plans need to be relevant and tested. We need to have adequate controls in place for cyber, very basic, but also some cybersecurity controls in place as well. And one of those is training and awareness. Are there standards that you need to comply with? So one of the questions asked on a cyber insurance application, as I mentioned earlier, is how many records do you have? Another question is, do you have a chief privacy officer? Do you have a chief information security officer? Do you have a chief information officer? Who's responsible for the organization? Do you comply with standards? Are you PCI DSS compliant? Are you complying with privacy legislation? Have you had any breaches? Be it an email hack or an email breach. What was it? What was lost? Have you had any penetration testing done? Where is your information? What software applications do you use? Are they in the cloud? Are they any there? And they will ask you about specific applications where there have been breaches. Are you using any of those? Are you using SolarWinds as well? What are you using in terms of all the applications, internal, external, and how is that information managed? Do you test your staff to make sure that they are cyber resilient, that they understand cyber? Insurance companies will also provide, some at no charge, vulnerability and penetration testing to make sure that your network is safe. And they will offer that as part of cyber insurance or maybe for a small additional fee. Next slide, please, Troy. We have seen something as simple as an email that comes into an organization that says, we have a contract with you and MacEwan University with such an organization here in Edmonton, where I'm located. And the email asked that the banking information for the contractor that MacEwan was dealing with be changed. And someone in MacEwan did that and walked away with $8 million, which I believe has since been recovered. So data breaches and data compromise as well happen. In terms of insurance, if you don't have proper backups, most insurance policies that exist now without a cyber insurance component will exclude data loss. It's already excluded in those policies. Now, if you have cyber, there will be some coverage for some costs, but if the base and backup data isn't there, how do you recover that data? If we use the city of Atlanta as an example, when they had their cyber breach, to this day, they still don't have a big chunk of their data. At one point, it was 40% was still unavailable to them. And there were different types of hackers around these days. There are hackers that want to keep a good reputation, good ransomware hackers, if there is such a thing. There's a way of rating how it was to deal with a certain cyber criminal group. When organizations that I'm aware of, that I know of, have had cyber attacks involving ransomware, and they now see the red screen that says your data has been encrypted, you need to pay this ransom, call this 1-855 or 800 number. You call that number, you get a nice, polite call center person who says, no, you have to pay the 7 million ransom. There's nothing we can do. And, you might try to negotiate and say, well, we can only afford this much. We weren't expecting to have to pay this. You might get escalated to a supervisor or a manager who has more authority to negotiate on that ransom. Scary, but they're operating their cyber attack business as a business, and that's how they make their money. So we need to think about these things. We need to also know that coverage under a cyber policy is not standardized, and the coverage that's granted will be based on the information in the various applications that can be 18 or 30 pages long that you have to answer, that talk about what security you have in place, your backups, the training you have, and I mentioned some of these pieces before. Another question that's asked, which relates to records and information management, is, do you have a retention schedule? Do you dispose of records in accordance with that? Do you have a process for doing that? And how often do you do it? Because having more data, especially of the personal and intellectual property kind, is, you might have intellectual property in your organization that the bad guys want to get a hold of and sell to others. With some of the other questions that we see, in addition to how many records do you have and where are your records, what systems are they in, there's also a question on data protection. So the security that you have in your EDRMS or in your record space, allowing or disallowing access to information, is another key that is looked at. Next slide, please, Troy. So you can get coverage for the Internet of Things under a cyber policy. So we have a lot of systems connected in our homes, but also in our business. APIs as well, integration of systems. And I mentioned pre-breach offerings, vulnerability and penetration testing, but also security, education, analysis, and cybersecurity monitoring. After a cyber event has been detected, professional services need to kick in, including a breach coach, which is usually a lawyer, and somebody who specializes in privacy and these types of situations. Forensics, and also PR. You need some PR out there to help with any reputational damage that your organization might face, and other specialized services to deal with a cyber event. Troy, can we flip to the next one? So I'm going to ask Rick to jump in and start to speak to some of these. But have you ever been asked to assist with cyber insurance coverage questions? I have been, and was able to work with getting our first cyber policy. Now, when you get your first cyber policy, it is not a good idea to post publicly that you have a new cyber policy with a limit of $7 million. And also know that even if you might have a policy with a limit of $7 million, your policy will have other terms and conditions, deductibles, retentions, and sublimits. So you might not actually have 7 million, but you don't want to advertise that so that the cyber attackers know.
Oh, no kidding, eh, Nicholas? Yeah, we have insurance. Come get us. We have lots of insurance.
Yeah.
always not a good thing to do, for sure. I wanted to flip around our discussion, and Nicholas does such a great job on this front end because he's so knowledgeable about the insurance business and how that side of the business works. I wanted to flip it around now a little bit and talk about this related to us now, the RIM folks on the call, and talk about how does this affect us? What's in it for us? I mean, how does this help us with things we might want to do in our organization to help our organizations that we work with? And I think some of these questions are interesting to me because many of you, and I could ask the question, we could have done a poll, right? If we were in a live room, I would be doing a straw vote right now. How many of you have actually been asked by your organization to get involved in answering the questions for cyber insurance that comes through the door? Now, Nicholas could say yes to that because he's actually done that as a practitioner with his organization, help them get through their, how many pages, Nicholas, are you up to now?
34 pages so far.
Okay, so I can remember when the first cyber insurance documents that I ever saw came out. Nicholas and I were actually doing a project out on the East Coast at the time, an information governance project early in that game. And we happened to walk past the IT director's office of that organization. And he said, wait, guys, you know anything about cyber insurance? And Nicholas, of course, said, oh, yeah, I know something about that. So we went into his office and he proceeded to let us look at his document he got from the insurance company, which wasn't very large, Nicholas. Say at that time, it was, there was probably 5 or 6 questions. And he said, I just don't even know what they're asking me. I have no idea. So that was the start of all of that. And I think I remember too, many organizations got insurance documents from their insurance companies, and there was no questions. It was just like, do you want cyber insurance or not? It was like, check the box and give me another, several $1,000s on my insurance policy cost, and we're good. So there's really no questions being asked because they didn't even know the questions to ask themselves, the insurance companies. So my question to all of you is, have you been asked to help your own organizations answering questions? Because I know for a fact that if an organization had a big page of questions, and one of those questions was, what do you have for information in your organization? And IT was at that table, they'd go, oh, we know where it is, we're good. A lot of times that would happen. And you would all be shocked and go, are you kidding me? We have no idea where some of this stuff is. I mean, you know better about what they're actually asking for than other folks in the organization would know because you're records and information management professionals. So back at you, do security teams care about paper records? That's a question back. Do they care? And the answer is yes, they do. Security people do care about paper records because, as we have all seen, sometimes you got HR documents in an open box in some basement location in your organization that's open to access from everybody in the place. I mean, I've seen that before too. I've even seen health records wide open on shelves, in fact, mental health records with an open door because they had a night shift that needed to get into the files and they left the doors open so anybody could walk in through there to see that information. I mean, yes, security people do care about that. Have any of you ever taken a security person to lunch? If you have security people in your organization, I would strongly suggest that's a good thing to do. If you get to know somebody in security, take them out to lunch, buy them lunch, and ask them about the security questions that may have come in the cyber insurance documents and see if you can help in any way. The other thing is, if you have risk people in your organization, have you ever sat down and talked to them about whether you might be able to aid them on the IM risk side of their risk portfolio? Because, you're not going to want to help them too much with how many people fall on the sidewalk outside your organization because there's ice on the sidewalk or anything like that. Risk is pretty broad, but if you get right down to the kind of fine tuning of information management risk, I think we're a great group of people that can really help the risk folks in your organization with that IM risk. By the way, we will post a list of potential questions with the other slide deck with the recording today. So these questions will all be in a list of potential questions. And insurance companies are going to keep expanding the question list because they don't want trouble and they're in it to make money. They're not in it to lose money because there was a security breach and it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And by the way, it does cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Forget the idea of paying for paying a bunch of hackers because they locked down a system. Forget that. Even if you said, no, we're not paying you hackers for any of that, there's still a whole bunch of things that happen during a breach incident that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's only if you can find the right people to actually do the work, because it takes very specialized people to do a lot of that work in the background. Troy, do you want to flip to the next one, please? Thank you. So this is a bunch of other, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because we want a little bit of time for questions after this, but databases. Do we have information in our databases in our organization that has PII, personally identifiable information, personal health information, PCI, that's your credit card information, that kind of thing? Do we have it in those databases? Does anybody know? How about unsupported software? Like I was always amazed when I started in the records and information management business that I ask an IT director how many applications they have in their organization. They will often tell me 800, 850, 1200. I mean, the number is staggering. If you said, well, we don't, right off the top of your head, we only got Microsoft Office and we've got, this and that. We got a few applications. We got 10 or 12. Well, that's not true. There's literally hundreds of applications floating around in most organizations, up in the high hundreds if you're in any sized organization. And what do we do about all that software? And does anybody test it? How about the stuff that needs to be decommissioned? Anyway, another story altogether. IT infrastructure is sometimes outsourced. If you're a smaller organization, many times your IT folks come from outside. Maybe you don't have as many people inside to look after your IT requirements. So that's an issue, a potential risk as well. Somebody else is doing that work. Third-party technology people could happen to all of us. If I ask the question in a room full of all of us right now, you'd all put your hands up. How many people have third-party people that do work on your own data in your organization? And the answer is going to be almost everybody. Troy? Thanks. So approximate number of unique individuals you collect, store, and or process personally identifiable information from. What kind of question? Who's going to answer that question? It takes a combination of a lot of people. Look at all the information that they're looking for here that may have to be answered to. And many of these things, you are a perfect person to help with that particular answer to all those questions. Troy, next slide. So how about this one? Please provide details of how often you purge records that are no longer required. What's IT going to say? And I'm not being hard on IT. I'm an IT guy. That's where I started in the business. And I can recall a time, and this is IT, right? I can recall a time we're doing an upgrade for a client. This is 25, 30 years ago, obviously. And we were doing a database update, and we just took a copy of the database, and we took the tape that we copied it on, and we dropped it in the vault. Did we tell any records people we did that? No. I mean, nobody knew. We just put a copy in the vault and said that we're just being safe. But I had no idea then about records management at all. It was just what you don't know, you don't know. So do you have a data retention and disposition plan? Well, who's going to know that except you, really? I mean, you're going to be the people that are going to know the answers to these questions. And what if they start asking us, not just do we have a data retention and disposition plan, do we actually follow our data retention and disposition plan? Now, that would be a terrifying thought, wouldn't it? Because many of us have that information, but we don't have the systems in place that will allow us to do that retention and actual disposition of the records on a regular basis in our organizations. Troy? Backups. It's a question I have been asking constantly to IT groups. and records and information management professionals over the years, when we do any kind of project internally, I'll ask about backups. And very rarely do I have people go, oh yeah, we know exactly what happens with backups. Because, as we all know, a backup should really be for disaster recovery purposes. We don't just, like I said, we don't just take a copy of the tape and drop it in the vault and leave it there forever. We should be only keeping those backups for a certain period of time. That makes sense these days during cyber incident situations. We want to make sure we have backups that will help us if anything like that seriously happens. So I don't know whether all of you ask those questions as part of your kind of records and information management practitioner experience in your organization, but certainly I think it's a question you should ask about to make sure we understand where those backups, why those backups are taken, where they live, and how long they're kept, that kind of thing. Troy? So business continuity, and Nicholas did a really good job talking about this business continuity disaster recovery plan. I don't know if all of you take part in those things, but you should be, obviously. And how often is it tested? To enforce procedures to remove content, including third-party content that may infringe or violate intellectual property. Who's going to know about copyright in your organization, but probably you and the privacy people, or you may be one and the same. You are the privacy people as well. Troy? So just to kind of finish off the presentation, I got a bunch of things that I just think are really important to think about. Is cyber insurance is not going to go down in price. It is going to get more and more and more expensive over time. And it may be at some point that an organization can't afford to have cyber insurance because it's gone up so much in price. But without being able to answer the questions successfully for a cyber insurance coverage from an insurance organization, it's going to be almost impossible at some point to get the coverage at all. So a list of questions for qualification is going to continue to grow, and it's going to get more and more and more complex. And you're going to be needed to answer some of those questions. I just throw this out because you know what insurance is like, right? If you check the box and say we do this or we don't do this or whatever, you better be right. Because if something serious happens and you've answered the question wrong, chances are you may not get covered for the insurance that you asked for because you didn't say the right thing on the insurance coverage. Troy? So I want to open it up now to questions. Nicholas and I will be here. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat window for us and let us know. I wanted to say, Nicholas, that I since you and I have done this presentation a couple of times, I've asked a lot of questions of a lot of people about insurance coverage and what they think about it, and still not many people kind of are in that mode where they go, wait, I could really help do my with the insurance coverage in our organization. And I know because you're in the spot you are that people actually bring that stuff to you and it causes you great pain because you have to answer a lot of those questions because of the nature of your position in the organization you work with. So, but I don't think a lot of people in records and information management have been involved really in answering any of the questions.
And that may be true, Rick. It's one of those things, the more you know, or the more you realize that you know, or the more that you have access to. And in terms of in the records and information management space, sometimes folks are so busy doing that they don't see or recognize what they have and what they can offer. And I am a chartered insurance professional and work closely with the Insurance Institute of Canada and in the Northern Alberta region, the Regional Institute. And a couple of weeks ago, we ran a presentation focused on cyber risk generally, not specifically to deal with any specific vertical but we talked a lot about the information management piece, and along in that discussion, one of our panelists is also a lawyer who works in the information governance space. So we were able to have some good conversation
That's great.
on, understanding the concepts. And I think that for those who are on this session who have the knowledge or who are IGPs or certified information professionals, I think you have some of that knowledge as well, and you can share and apply it. So I think there's that opportunity.
Yeah, I'll just say to the group, if for those of you that don't know, ARMA International has a certification called Information Governance Professional. And the kind of short form of that story is an IGP, the vision of an IGP when we started writing the original Information Governance Professional certification material was that somebody would be able to understand the various disciplines involved in that information governance side, which is legal, risk, privacy, records and information management, IT, and security. And now I've added one more, Nicholas, to that, which is data. I've added data to that list as well because data people are showing up in many organizations that I talk to and never had them before. It's kind of like when the risk people started to come in, 10 years ago, you never really saw risk people in many organizations. And all of a sudden, you can't go anywhere now in larger organizations without there being risk people in that location. So it's kind of an evolutionary thing that's happening. So there is data people now as well in many organizations, and so I added that to the information governance kind of tree really in many people I talk to now.
Rick, just to echo some discussion yesterday at a Insurance Institute convocation ceremony where the president and CEO of National and myself spoke to our graduates and award recipients. Risk is everywhere. And so we need people who can work with certain types of risks as well as risk generally and holistically. And in the course that I teach, we have folks from IT, of course, different roles in insurance, risk management, shipping companies, municipalities who participate, who register to take the course as well, not to promote it in any way, but just to support that risk is everywhere and it needs to be managed. And information risk is something that we need to manage properly. We need to manage it carefully with the cyber threats that are out there. Cyber, the risks of living in the world of where information is the new currency, and is one of those is the risk is huge, and it's evolving. As I said, there isn't a standard cyber insurance policy.
Yeah.
But hand it back to you, and for any questions that we might have.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I don't know about all of you, but I bet I get 2 to 3 highly engineered phishing attacks every day now. Where if you didn't know any better, you would easily be saying, yeah, what is this, and having a look at it if you didn't really know that some of that stuff was happening. It's like I used to get one every 2 weeks, and now I get like 2 or 3 a day. So it's the evolution of how incredibly clever these folks are, and how they've evolved in trying to do the worst things to organizations. Is
if
really
you have
amazing.
this term president or CEO in your title, you will get those.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's tough, and I'm going to say we have no questions right now in the chat window.
I got a couple things that I can bring up if you'd like to.
Sure.
So just to kind of, I know you just as you're wrapping up the conversation there, you're kind of gearing towards and kind of that focus around the risk. I just wanted to kind of maybe not so much a question, but give you an opportunity to kind of expand on in a particular case when it applies to insurance. So the idea of backups was a very much big part of this, where it's like they're going to ask you if you have backups because of data recovery. But what I think was maybe missed and a lot of people might have not quite understood is that in the explicit action of doing backups, which you might need to require to have the insurance, you are also introducing more risk in having that backup, right? It's not just that you're going to be able to get cyber insurance cheaper. It's that you are also introducing more risk in doing that action as well. So there's like this cascading effect that happens when we're trying to mitigate risk, but in some cases will also introduce more risk as well. Do you want to maybe talk to how, maybe even just from the insurance side, how they would look at it, and then internally in an organization, your process of doing backups and how you can help mitigate those risks doing
Did
that
you want
process?
that from me, Troy? Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So one of the challenges with backups is that backups can also become infected with malware. And backups are introducing another copy of your database that can also be hacked, subject to a cyber attack. But the perspective of having a backup and the reason for asking about that is if you had to recover, and we want to help your organization recover as an insurer, we want you to have backups you can continue operating with because the cost of your business being interrupted is going to be high if you can't. And then how do we actually fix the situation and put you back in the same financial position, hopefully, you were before the cyber loss occurred? So back to the backups, are you running disposition on your backups as well, right? How often are your backups um, reviewed, tested? Are they tested for penetration testing? Are they tested for what's actually sitting in them as well? So yes, there's some other risk definitely that comes with backups, but looking for a backup is okay. So you've had an attack. Is that a clean backup like the MERS case in Ghana, where their backup and their site was clean because they hadn't run any updates and it hadn't become infected, where all their other sites and their backups were also infected by the cyber attack, except for that one Ghana, West Africa location.
Yeah, I mean the other side of that two-edged sword too is that I've often talked to organizations that had backups that went back years. I mean they just kept socking them away in a vault or in a storage location, and they had backups going back 3 years. And I said, well, what if there was litigation or anything like that? Do you realize how many of those backups you'd have to remount and go through if you had to do any kind of e-discovery on stuff like that? Like it would be astounding, and that used to happen in the old days during, particularly in the US when it's so highly litigious, that people that had hundreds of backups of information had to restore all of those things to an infrastructure and look for information in those backups as well. So it's really quite a two-edged sword. You're right, Troy. There's a lot of connotations to that backup situation for sure.
And also a simple access to information request under a FOIP Act or ATIP or FIPA.
Absolutely, absolutely, and of course, we all know that the access to information has not progressed. Like you hardly get any new ones, right? Everybody I talk to, it's an exponential increase in freedom of information requests right across the country. Like everybody just goes, "Oh my God, it's awful," trying to get that done. And I think it was during COVID, like everybody had so much more time on their hands, they could just ask all kinds of things of their municipalities or whoever they were trying to get information from. They had lots of time to kill. Well, they could ask all those freedom, do all those freedom of information requests, and way more complex ones too. And of course, you guys all have, you can charge so much money for doing those requests as well. Responding to the requests, like what is it, 25 to $30 in many jurisdictions to be able to do that that response to. Man, it just isn't favorable.
Just actually, we're getting close to the end of the hour, but I thought I would want to touch on kind of one more thing here, talking about backups, and often that'll be third-party services as well. Do we want to talk a little bit about how your insurance applies to incidences that might affect your third-party hosting services, backup services, and stuff? Just to, I'm sure some people would have that question if they're going to go through this process. Hey, if something happens to my third party, am I still covered with my cyber insurance, or am I only counting on them to have their cyber insurance and to take care of any incidences?
Yeah, so I'll pick that one up, Troy. So yes, we know that today we do a lot of outsourcing. We software as a service, platforms as a service. We know that nothing is immune right now to a cyber attack. Cloud, on-site, third party. will your cyber policy respond? If you have declared that you use a certain third-party provider, yes, it will, but that third-party provider should also have cyber insurance too, because that's where if their network is breached, their network liability piece might come into play. So this all has to be declared in the insurance application. The other thing that has to be considered as well is that we have to think about legislation as it applies to breaches, and it will be different for different verticals. So the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions that regulates banks and federally chartered insurance companies has rules on dealing with incidents, when they must be reported, what they must report on, and also advisories and recommendations for organizations that OSFI applies to as well that must be used as well. And then we also have privacy legislation. So if that attack on a third party provider, you outsource some of your IT services, and there is a breach of the data that you have stored through an outsourced IT service provider, and in that breach is a lot of PII and PHI and PCI, ultimately, the company doing the outsourcing is responsible because the data that they collected and used as part of their business process was entrusted to them, hopefully with consent from. But again, ultimately the responsibility lies with them, but there can also be joint liability too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So those are things that all have to be looked at and considered. And it's a little bit of a jungle right now.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Nicholas, is just going to keep getting more complex and more interwoven. Yeah, and I understand, and you could probably add some value to this part of the discussion. I understand that the insurance people that are actually giving cyber insurance now are able to do cyber insurance. The number of those companies is getting smaller. Like some, not all the players are actually doing their own cyber insurance now. They're handing off some of that to other organizations because they don't want to do it themselves.
Yeah, there were some that specialized in it. Some are so you've got in the insurance chain, you've got the broker, you've got the insurer, you also have a reinsurer. So some are transferring 100% of it to their reinsurer. So the reinsurers are handling the claims, but they're achieving spread of risk in terms of spreading the exposure more broadly. But also, the food for thought there as well is that you've got the reinsurers, you've got some companies that are specializing in cyber insurance, but they know a lot about it in terms of the technical side. Now they've learned. And we also have seen that back in, I think it was 2021, insurance companies were seeing these cyber attacks increasing, and partly because people were working from home without proper network protection and so on. Sure. And so what was happening was, without that in place, insurance companies were reserving claims. So they were putting aside large amounts of dollars to deal with those claims. And so that drove up a key metric in insurance, which is a loss ratio. Since then, those reserves have been brought down. And right now, I would say, based on the stats I've seen most recently, for every dollar an insurance company's insurance cyber collects, they pay out $1.36. Whereas in 2021, it was $4 for every dollar collected. How do you make a profit that way? You don't.
Right. Well, we've hit the top of the hour, and I want to thank Troy for looking after us today. Thanks, Troy, and Nicholas. Thank you so much for being my good friend and fellow presenter on this topic. I thoroughly enjoy hearing you speak about all the insurance pieces that relate to this, and thank all of you for coming to the session today. And we will have the recording of the session up. If you want to show it to someone else or have someone else look at it, it'll be there, as well as the list of questions and the slide deck. So thanks again, and thanks for supporting IM Canada Connect, brought to you by all the ARMA chapters in Canada. And we'll see you for a Christmas session in December.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
So much. Thank you, Rick, for inviting me. Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.